فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So in the last class in Mutn Shujaa, we left off talking about a tayammum. And this is something as a rukhsa, and a rukhsa is something that is made easier in the deen, which goes against the normal rule. It's something that goes against the normal rule, but it's something that's made easy in the deen. And there's a general principle with it, is that it's always going to take, we're always going to take caution when we go to this. We're never going to go and take any extra leaps to take more of this rukhsa than we have clear evidence for. And so we talked, the first thing that the author, Abu Shujaa, he talks about is, he says, وَشُرَاءُ التَّيَمُّمِ خَمْسَةُ أَشْيَاء. So he talks about there's 5 conditions for tayammum. The first of them is وُجُودُ الْعُذْرِ. And then he says like that someone needs to have that udhr, which is that reason, or the excuse to use tayammum. Of course, because this is against the norm. It's against the normal rule. So we need to have that udhr. And that udhr, he said, بِسَفَرٍ أَوْ مَرَضٍ. And so he mentioned here that it's with safar, which is and going on a journey, or it's with marad, which is someone being sick. And these are the 2 they mentioned, but in general, the safar means that someone doesn't have water. It's either you either don't have water, or you are not able to use the water because of a sickness. Like say I cut open my head, and if I were to put water to it, it would fester the wound, and this is a issue. So if it's either because I can't find the water or I can't use the water, these are like the 2 things. And also, if somebody finds the water but they can't reach it and there's no way to reach it, it's like it's not there. And that's another thing for them. And so the first of these conditions is that he has the excuse from either the water not being available or he can't use the water. Then the next of the conditions is وَدُخُولُ وَقْتِ الصَّلَاةِ, and that the time for the salah has to enter. Because this is something that is narrated from the beginning of the beginning of the ayah that Allah tells us about wudu. He says إِذَا كُمْتُم مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ, and so then he talks about إِذَا كُمْتُم مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ. So this is when we come into the time for salah. This is when he tells us to فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ until the end, and then فَإِن لَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا. So then at the end of this, after all this connection, but if you're sick or on a journey and then you don't find water, فَتَيَمَّمُوا. And so this is understood from the beginning of the ayah that we have that we need to make wudu whenever we go to salah. And this was something that was made easy for us. So this was taken as a rukhsa, and if we kept our wudu and we didn't break it, then we can go straight to straight to salat without making wudu again. But for tayammum, it stays on the basis. And originally the salat was to be prayed. Every single salat was to be prayed with a new wudu. And then it was made easier to where if we didn't break the wudu, then we could do that. And so the tayammum doesn't take that extra ease. It stays on the basis, which is every single salah is that way. And also there's a hadith about this meaning that there's only one tayammum for that, and someone needs to make a tayammum for every single time that they pray. And so the time has to come in for that salat to be valid. So if I make tayammum beforehand, then I need to wait till the time for that salat asr. For example, I need to wait for the asr or salat time to come in before I make tayammum for it. And so the next thing he says here is what talab al-ma', and so this is looking for water. And the looking for water is either the person is either in one state where he knows there's no water. He knows there's absolutely no water. He's in a plain. He's like in an open plain. And as far as the eye can see, it's all desert. Okay, there's no water. And he has just enough water to keep him on the journey. So that's he knows that how much water is there, and it's only enough for him to go so far. So it's like he doesn't have water, and he doesn't need to go like search anymore. Or he searched, and nothing changed. Like he searched the area, he knows that nobody has water, and nothing has changed from that time. And so this is like that he looked for water. And so also like the radius for this is like, and it's about a mile. Like if you know that there's water within a mile, then you got to go get it. If it's farther than a mile, and you know that there's water, but it's farther than a mile, you don't have to go travel a mile to get the water. And so this is roughly it's about a mile for that place where someone needs to go to actually get the water if it's available. And if not, then it's too far. It's not the shariah isn't going to call you to go on a journey to get water. In this case, there's no water with you, and so that's how that's all that's required of you. You did what was required of you. And so the next one, which is ta'addur isti'mali, is when somebody can't use the water, either because they're, like we talked about, they're sick and they have like a gash, or they have some type of maybe the water is polluted and it's going to rip up the skin if they use it. So the water is there, but if they were to use it, it would cause harm. So in this case, it's like it's not there. They can't use it, or the water is in a place that's dangerous to go to, or there's like a bunch of angry hippos around the water. So like all of these scenarios, the water's there, but you can't use it. So because of that, this is an excuse for you. And also i'wazuhu ba'da talab, which is like that he can't use it after he looked, or that he's like sure that it's not there. And then he says here, what turabu tahirun lahu ghubar. And he also said here the dirt that is pure, so it can't have any like najis on it. And it also has gubar, and gubar is like what you would call dust. Like that's what would be dust. And this can work for like this turab. In general, turab is something that grows. And so, but if you have something like gravel, this would not work, because gravel is not it's not turab. Like if you have gravel, or if you had like the thing that people like, the gis, or it's like the gypsum, I think is what they call it. But it's what people use for like the working inside of homes, like plaster. Like this is not dirt. It's not dirt. So because of that, we can't use this for it. But it needs to be actually dirt. And he says here, فَإِنْ خَالَتُهُ جِسٌ أَوْ رَمْلٌ لَمْ يُجْزِ. And so here he said that if it gets mixed with jis أو رمل, and raml is jis is the gypsum, and raml is sand. He says lam yujzi. And here he says that this wouldn't work. And when I looked back at some of the other books, the sand itself, it's permissible as long as there's gubar. And this is in the other books of the madhab, such as in Minhaj, and also in other Sharbini, he talks about this, that if you have sand, which is raml is sand, and if you have sand and there is gubar in it, then you can use it, and there's no problem with that. And so that's the one thing in the last class. I think I talked about the sand, and this is a correction from that. So then he talks about the next thing, and so he talked about these are the conditions for the dirt. One, we talked about the dirt needs to be pure, needs to have a gubar, and it can't be mixed with anything else that's going to stop the actual turab from reaching. So if the person is wiping their face, they need to make sure that all of it can reach their face. So if it was mixed with something, say it was mixed with gypsum or some other type of thing, some other type of like dusty thing that isn't actually dirt, then in this case that thing would stop the dirt from reaching your face. If you were to do this, it would be mixed with something else, so not all of it would be dirt touching your face. And so we're going to talk about the thing that the actual action itself, which is the fara'iduhu arba'atu ashya. He says wa fara'iduhu arba'atu ashya, and farida is the mufrad, like the individual, which is farida. And what he means here is by arkan. Like we'll use rukun, arkan, pillar, and we'll also use fara'id, which is the yarhamukallah. And we'll also use the term farida, or we'll also use rukun. So it'll be a pillar, or like sometimes he'll use fard. And a lot of times the author here, Abu Shujaa, rahimahullah, he uses the word farida or fard, and he means rukun. And so this is important. Some of the terminology, it gets a little changed, but it's basically the same meaning. It's what you have to have, and without it, the thing doesn't exist. And it's a part of it. And so he says here, an-niyah, which is the first one. So the person, he needs to have the niyah, and this happens, this niyah, when does it happen? It happens while he's hitting the ground, or when he's hitting the ground, and the niyah also is when he's bringing it up to his face for the first time. And so this is, the niyah needs to be there. And of course, even the word tayammum, it means qasd. Like the word itself means intention. So this, of course, like it has to have niyah, like for this action here. And so this word, like linguistically, like tayammum means like uqsudu, and so like, or aqsidu. And so like this is to have that intention to get that sa'id and tayyiba. And sa'id and tayyiba is like that good dirt. And so this is the first part, which is the niyyah, and also because of the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. That's the other reason for that. And also وَمَسْحُ الْوَجْهِ, and also wiping the face. So when someone is going down to get the dirt, they hit it, and they have to have their niyyah when they come down and they hit the dirt with their hands. And they would have their hands kind of spread out, whatnot, so they can get all the dust comes on it. Then they would pull it up. And in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he showed people how to do it, and he hit the ground with his hands, and then he blew off some of the extra dirt, because of course the purpose is not to make ourselves dirty. The purpose is to wipe with the dirt that is still on our hands. So he blew off the extra dirt, and then he wiped his face, and he wiped his hands. And this is what he wiped in the hadith. And he said that this would be enough for you. So this is the Prophet ﷺ when he was referring to someone who had gone overboard in the tayammum. He said that this would be enough for you. And this is basically what we have for what is required for us is in this hadith. And so he says here, وَمَسْحُ الْوَجْهِ. This is the first one. And then he also says, وَالْيَدَيْنِ مَعَ الْمِرْفَقَيْنِ. And also liyadain, and also the word yad in Arabic, as I mentioned before, it means all of this. It means all from here, from like where we say the fingertips, all the way to like the shoulder. All of this is yad. And he says ma'al mirfaqain, and he says with the elbows. And so this is the view of the Shafi'i. The view of the Shafi'i opinion is that the tayammum needs to go all the way down the arm, like up to the elbow, and include the elbows. And this is the view because the tayammum is a replacement of wudu. And so the yad that is required in wudu is the same yad that's required in tayammum. And so there's nothing here that changed. And there's in another, like a lot of times there's differences of opinion. Of course, outside the madhabs there's differences of opinion, but inside the madhab there's also differences of opinion. And one of the views inside the madhab is that just the hands themselves, like just the kef itself, would be enough. And this is one of the views. And of course, the hadith I mentioned, that the Prophet ﷺ, he only wiped the kef, is what it's mentioned in the hadith. And he said that this would be enough for you. And if he said this would be enough, we understand that we don't need to wipe all of this. That's not something that would be extra. But the Shafi'i madhab, the majority of the Shafi'i madhab, they say that it's up to the mirfaqain. And so this is the majority, but like the hadith is very clear. And also this is a view inside of the madhab, and this is what like a majority of the people outside the madhab would also say this is the strongest opinion, because of looking at the meaning of the hadith, and Allah knows best. And also the last of these four, so we have niyyah, wiping the face, wiping the hands. And when we wipe our hands, just another note, this is with the second hit. The first hit, we would hit once, wipe our face. We'd hit another time, and then we'd wipe our hands, and like the madhab would wipe all the way up to here, and then they would wipe back down, and to make sure that they get all of it. And then the same thing with this side, they'd wipe all the way down until they reach all of the hand. They have like a special way that the madhab will talk about how it should be done, and there's no like necessarily a hadith with that way, but it's something that they mention. But this is with the second hit, and then also it needs to, he says what tartib is, that it needs to be in order. And so that's the last of these conditions. It needs to be in order. And also the two hits is also mentioned in the madhab, and Allah knows best. And so this is the general concept. And the mesh it means that you have hit the dirt, and that you've made the dirt reach that area. So you've got that dirt to reach that area. And of course you need to reach all of the areas. So if you're just leaving some of it where you're not wiping, say if I was to wipe like this, I didn't wipe this. So I need to wipe all of what my face is. I need to make sure I wipe all of it. Do I need to get like under all my hairs and check and all that? No. But I need to wipe all of my face, and I need to make sure that I get all of the face that I was washing. I need to make sure that I wiped it. And the same thing if there's a ring that I have that's on my hand, I need to make sure either I take off the ring to make sure the dirt got in it, or I move it to where I can make sure that the dust got to that place. But it needs to be completely covered. Like I need to have wiped every single part of that with dirt. And so that's in regards to the fara'idah. And so so these are all the things that are required for the actual action. And then there's some things that are sunnah, and he's going to mention them. And so he says, وَسُنَّنُهُ ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْيَاء. And so he says there's three things that are sunnah, and this is, of course, there could be more to this depending on different people, but this is what he brings. He says, first, at-tasmiyah. As mentioned before, the difference between tasmiyah and the basmala is the tasmiyah, and tasmiyah is just saying Bismillah. And the basmala is saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So if this is the word that they would use for the basmala, is for all of that, and the tasmiyah is just for Bismillah. And so this is the first thing he mentions here is from the sunnah. And we said this for the wudu, so he says it also for ghusl and also tayammum. And while there's not any clear evidence of that the Prophet ﷺ did this, they take with general evidence for this, that this is something that's normally mustahab. And also he says here, وَتَقْدِيمُ الْيُمْنَى عَلَى الْيُسْرَى, and this is also putting the right before the left. So wiping the right, we wipe the right hand before we wipe the left hand. And this is so this is normally sunnah, and this is sunnah in all of the things whenever we have one side or another, to start with the right and then go to the left. And also he says wal mawala, and this is doing one thing after another, so not breaking up the face from the hands. And of course the niyyah needs to be all the way from, as I mentioned before, the niyyah needs to be when you hit the ground, all the way to when you're bringing the dirt to your face. This all needs to have niyyah. Until you actually do the first wiping, which is the first of like the actual pillars, needs to be accompanied by the niyyah. And the niyyah is something that always has to hit the beginning, the first rukun of whatever you're doing. It needs to hit it. Like the first pillar, the niyyah needs to be there at that point. And so kind of the moving and taking it to that's kind of a all in one thing that hits once you hit the face and whatnot. So this is when the niyyah needs to be there. And also, and going back to the niyyah, what are you actually intending? And the intention here is istibaha. This is what which means making something permissible. Because as I mentioned before, tayammum doesn't take away the hadith. Like if you have in the impurity, it doesn't take away your impurity, but rather it's a rukhsa that allows you to pray with your impurity. So if you're intending to get rid of your impurity with this, the madhab of Shafi'i is like, you're not getting rid of your impurity. For you intending with this to get rid of your impurity doesn't do it. You have to intend for you to allow yourself to pray. Like to take off whatever that, like the thing that is it's impermissible for us to pray unless we made tahara. But in this case, we're intending to make it permissible for us to pray while we're doing what Allah commanded to us to do in the tayammum. And so this is that niyyah needs to be that. And also for praying an obligatory prayer, then we're making this tayammum for that obligatory prayer. And then any of the sunnahs we can do after that, and he'll talk about that here.
Sorry, the third sunnah, it was the intention? And
this is actually one of the parts of the niyyah. So I went back a little bit, yeah. The intention is part of the niyyah, and also I mentioned the part of the intention itself also needs to have it's not raising the tahara, but rather it's bringing it back together. So I went backtracked just a little bit. And then, but the sunnah that he mentioned were three. It was the tasmiyah, saying Bismillah, doing the right before the left, and also mawala, which is doing them all together without any breaks.
Oh, okay.
So these are the three sunnah. And he says here, the next thing he's going to talk about is what breaks the tayammum, or like what breaks the tayammum. And he says, وَالَّذِي يُبْتِلُ التَّيَمُّمَ ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْيَاء. So he says there are three things that break the tayammum. And the first of this is whatever breaks wudu. He says, مَا أَبْطَلَ الْوُضُوءَ. So whatever broke wudu also breaks tayammum. Of course, it's like it. And so any of the things that broke wudu is also going to break tayammum, because it's the replacement of it, and the replacement is weaker than what it's replacing. So if you got someone who's stepping in and taking, he's filling in a position, he usually doesn't know he can't do all the things that the original person can do that is in that position. So this is like him. He can't, anything that breaks in wudu also breaks the tayammum. And also adding another thing, وَرُؤْيَةُ الْمَاءِ فِي غَيْرِ وَقْتِ الصَّلَاةِ. And so he says here, and seeing water in a time other than salah. And so when the person is in salah, if he's outside of salah here, what he's saying is if you're outside of salah and you see water, your tayammum is done. It's no longer valid. And so, of course, because you need to go make wudu. And so unless you know the amount of water that you see is like that small amount of water, it's not going to benefit you and you need to use it for drinking, that's another thing. But if you see that water, that there is water now, and you're not in salah, then you need to go use that water to actually make wudu to pray, because now you no longer have that rukhsa. And if you are in salah Then he said, and then what we'd understand from this, he says, في غير وقت الصلاة, is if you were in salah, then you could continue your salah.
I have a question.
Yeah,
So wudu purifies you
from the hadith.
from the
Yeah,
hadith,
yeah.
but tayammum doesn't.
It doesn't purify you from the hadith, but it allows you to pray with it.
So wouldn't it make sense that, like, if I'm in salah and I
Mhm.
see something that will take away the hadith over something that just allows me to pray, wouldn't I get the water?
This is what most of the people are. Most of the madhab, they say this. Like most of the opinions are that this person, their wudu breaks, or like their tayammum is no longer valid because they should go and do this. But the like the way that the Shafi'is they look at this is they say you were allowed to start up the salah, and when you started up the salah, you were allowed to do this. So there's nothing that comes that says there needs to be some evidence that tells me I'm no longer allowed to pray the salah that I was allowed to start. And there's also a general principle that things are forgiven in continuation that they're not forgiven in the beginning. So if you had certain things that like at the beginning you need to have all of these conditions met. If some of them are like dropped and they're lowered, and then you're able to start, and then all of a sudden during the middle you're able to finish all these conditions. Do you have to do this? And this is kind of that situation. Like you can forgive for things that happen in the middle that you can't forgive at the beginning. And so that's another of the principle. But of course, like if I was allowed to pray at the beginning, then why is that allowance now taken away? But it is sunnah to stop. Like to leave the difference of opinion, it's sunnah to stop, to break the prayer. If someone is in salah, it's sunnah for them to stop their prayer. And of course, if they are in salah and they had a certain, like say they're praying something that's from the nawafil, if they're praying just something, they can't add any number to the rakat that they're doing once the water comes. So if they had intended, I'm going to pray, they say I'm going to pray 2 rakat, and then water comes, they can't say, I'm going to add some. Like say I'm going to pray 2, 4. And this is something that's permissible in general to pray extra rakat. And if someone's just doing like a regular prayer without any limitations, but if they can't add anymore once the water comes, they need to just stick to what they originally planned and then finish it off, and then they need to make wudu for the next thing. But this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab here, and that's kind of the reason, the way they look at it. And also they do say it's sunnah for you to break the salah and go make wudu. Yeah.
But they continue the rak'ah?
No, you would break the salah and you would start from the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if it's obligatory?
Even if it's obligatory, you would, because of the strength of the argument, you would break it because of this. Yeah. And normally, no, you wouldn't break an obligatory salah. But this, because of like the strength of the argument, this would be something that is permissible to do. And Allah knows best. But this is, if you were in an obligatory salah and you wanted to finish it off, and water came while you're in the salah, then you can finish it off. And this is the madhab of Shafi'i. And then also the last one he mentioned here is ridda, billah. And like if someone apostated while they did wudu, and then they came back to Islam, they said something of kufr and whatnot, and then they made tawbah, and then they said the shahadatain, and they made tayammum before that. They would need to make tayammum again. That broke their tayammum. So because with wudu, they wouldn't need to do this. Wudu is stronger, and this wudu wouldn't be broken by ridda. But tayammum, since it's weak, it would be broken by ridda. This is something that they mention, but it is a difference between the two, because of course it's a replacement, and it also takes that niyyah. And a person who is in a lot of the rukhas, the person who is sinning with a rukhas, he can't use a rukhas while he's sinning with it. So if a person, he mentioned here that I'm going on a journey. If the person was going on a journey to do, like his going on a journey was so that he could do something haram. Like the point of his journey was something haram, then he can't take this rukhas.
Just for the intention.
Because the intention is for him to do something wrong. And so the asi, he doesn't take the rukhas. Like any rukhsa, he can't do it. The person who is sinning with his journey can't take this rukhsa.
So shortening the prayer,
No, he's not allowed to do that, no. He can't shorten the prayer. If he went on the journey, say he went on the journey to go do zina with a woman. So he left, he's going 50 miles, he's like, oh, this is 50 miles, good, I can shorten the prayer. No. You can't shorten the prayer. You can't do tayammum. You ran out of that. What is he supposed to do at this point? If you can't do tayammum, they say yalzamahu at-tawbah. Like he's gotta make tawbah, and he's gotta make tawbah. And then if the journey for him to go back or to go somewhere else with the pure intention of not sinning, or just any intention that isn't sinning in and of itself, like if he was going to Las Vegas to gamble, okay, like this is not going to work for him. Like he's not going to take this rukhas because this rukhas is for something that's mubah. It's something that is for something permissible, and you can't take a rukhas to do something haram with. This is a principle there. So he would need to make tawbah, and once he makes tawbah, if the next of his journey starting from here is going to be 50 miles, then he can take the rest of the rukhas of shortening his salah and whatnot. That is if he made tawbah from here and the rest of his journey encompasses that. But if it was shorter than that, then no. But of course the tayammum, he would be able to do that if doesn't have water, because that doesn't necessarily take that same, it's not talking about that length of distance. Rather, it's talking about the inability to use water. Allah ta'ala alam. So this is tayammum in a nutshell, and he's going to give a couple other things in regards to the person who's sick. So in regards to the person who's sick, or they can't use the water. And so he says here, وَصَاحِبُ الْجَبَائِرِ. And so like the person who has a jabira is the singular, the mufrad is jabira, and the plural is jaba'ir, which is like a splint. Something that yajburu, it's something that you would use to it's like a splint or a cast. Like if you'd say someone who has a cast, and this also would go for someone who had like a bandage on it. This would also be, but the meaning here is like a cast. Sahibul jabairi yamsahu alayha. So the person that has a cast, he wipes on top of the cast. And this is because it's treated, and this is something that's treated like the khuf. And here in this case, the closest thing that we could see for this person, of course he can't, it would be a very, very difficult thing for him to have to take off his cast, especially some of the way that casts they're not able to be taken off easily. And so because of that, then he would wipe on top of it, but we treat it like a khuf. So he needs to have made wudu before he put it on. This is the madhab Shafi'i. He needs to have made wudu before putting it on. And he says, وَيَمْسَحْ عَلَيْهَا. Like it's a khuf, except there's no that time period. The time period is not the problem with this, but he needs to put it on wudu. This is the Shafi'i view. And وَيَتَيَمَّمْ وَيُصَلِّي. And so he makes tayammum, and then he prays. And this also he says يَمْسَحْ عَلَيْهَا. This means he makes wudu. He makes wudu with what he can do, and then يَتَيَمَّمْ. So he makes wudu with all the steps that he can. But if he has a cast on his arm and whatnot, then he wipes over the cast on his arm, and he makes tayammum for that cast. Now, say he had a cast on his foot too. He got in a bad car accident, so he's got two different places where he needs to wipe, and that he can't do this. So he would make tayammum to make up for this, and then he would also make another tayammum to make up for the other one. This is the madhab, because each one of these reasons of something that is missing out in that would take a tayammum. So this is, and then he prays. Yeah, and then he says, وَلَا إِعَادَةَ عَلَيْهِ إِنْ كَانَ وَضَعَهَا عَلَى طُهْرٍ. And so he says, and there's no making up of those prayers that he prayed. Like la i'ada. I'ada is redoing. عَلَيْهِ إِنْ كَانَ وَضَعَهَا عَلَى طُهْرٍ. If he put it on while he was in a state of purity. And so this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, is that the person who put their jabira on, or whatever it is, like they had a bandage or something, and they put it on while they're in a state of tahara, then in this case they wipe over it, and it's like a khuf, and they don't need to make up the prayer. What if he didn't have the state of tahara, which is actually the most part. Like most of the time people don't think about this thing. Then in this case, the Shafi'i madhab is that this person needs to remake all of these prayers up. Yes, he prays them, but he needs to remake them up because there was something missing in all of them. And this is a kind of a severe view, and also looking at the amount of people that go through this thing. A lot of times someone will be unconscious and they put on a jabira. Like if someone had like a car accident or something, they put on a thing on it, he wakes up and he's got stuff all over him. Like, and how can you say this guy's now got to make up all of his salah? But there's a general principle that one of the students of Imam Shafi'i and Mutn that he gave, which is his principle, but most of the people, they always mention it, and it's a very strong principle, and it's يجوز تقليده. And so like you can follow this opinion, which is basically any salah that the shariah told you to do, or any action that the shariah tells you to do, with some type of, and it allowed you to do the action in the first place, with some type of naqs in it, or like something that's missing from it, but the sharia gave you that allowance to do it, then you don't need to make it up afterwards. So this is a general principle that al-Muzani, he is also mujtahid mutlaq. Like he's like one of the greatest students of Imam Shafi'i that was under him, and also wrote a lot. But he basically gave this principle that if the sharia told you to do something, and you did it, then it's no longer required for you to redo it again, because there was something missing in it. Like if, say in this case, we're missing something, like we're missing that complete tahara, in this sense. He says there's no i'ada, like the person doesn't need to go make it back up again, because the sharia told you to do it in the first place. You did what was called for you to do because you're allowed to do it, and you did it, then this is all that's required. If for whatever reason you weren't allowed to do this, you didn't have wudu in the first place. Of course, like this is something that the sharia didn't give you the allowance to do this.
I mean, this is when you take out this jawr.
Jabira, yeah.
When you take it out.
Yeah. And so if you were to take it out, like say there's some, what is it?
And there is no risk.
Yeah, if you're able to take off I think some of the times they have these casts nowadays that open up with the little Velcro. You can take it out and you can wash it. If you can wash it, then you can wash it. And you have to. Like this is, if you're able to do it, you must do it. It's for the things that are unable. And they're actually like, because of like these days and age, I think a lot of times when people break their foot, they have an actual they have a big shoe that they put it in, and they can actually open it up with Velcro, right? Yeah, and like when I was a kid, they would always just wrap it up with plastic and whatnot, and that was set. You can't do anything about it. It stank after like 2 weeks. And so, but now I think people could open it up and they can wash it. If they can wash it up without any hardship, then they need to do this.
What if it causes pain for them?
If it's causing a lot of pains or hardship for them, then they don't need to do it. But if it was like, say if they had the ghusl, and it's only going to be one time, and they're able to deal with that, then it's best for them to do that, of course. But if it's going to be like every single salah, then maybe treat it like a khuf in this case.
What if one hand have been put a cast on?
Oh, like a hand?
Yeah, what if his hands has been casted?
Oh, and he casts it up. If it's
how does he do tayammum?
He just does it with the one hand. Okay. He just he would make it. No, you can do it with his hand that is messed up.
That's messed up?
You can do it with the hands that's messed up. And if you say he needs to do another tayammum for the tayammum that's missing, it's going to run in circles. They call this tasalsul, where one thing necessitates the thing that won't be fixed except the thing, and it runs back in circles. Yes. They usually stop with that. They stop with the one line of that. Allah musta'an. So yes, of course, the person, if the person is aware, then he should treat it like it's a khuf and try to make sure that he makes wudu beforehand, before he puts on the cast. And then he can treat it after that. And of course, if he's able to open it up and wash, and without any major hardship, then that's what he has to do. And if it's going to be a major hardship, then in that case, he wouldn't have to do that for the major hardship that it is. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And also he says, وَيَتَيَمَّمُ لكل فريضة ويصلي ويتيمم بتيمم واحد ما شاء من النوافل. He says, and he makes tayammum for every single faridah, every single obligatory salah. He makes tayammum for every single one, as I mentioned before. And this is also narrated from Umar radiallahu anhu, that he says that the person makes tayammum for every single salah, even if he didn't break his wudu. Like إِن لَمْ يَحْدُث وَإِن لَمْ يَحْدُث. And so like even if he didn't, or yuhdith, even if he didn't and come into a state of like the impurity, he still needs to do this. And of course he wouldn't say this unless it was from, this isn't from his opinion. Like a lot of times there's hadith that this person wouldn't say something like straight up unless it was coming from the wahy itself. And there's certain things that people say from ijtihad, and certain things that don't come from ijtihad. And here, this would be something that he's saying not from a place of ijtihad, but rather from what he knew from the shariah. And so, Wallahu a'lam. And then he also says, so this person would وَيُصَلِّي بِتَيَمُّمْ وَاحِدٍ مَا شَاءَ مِنَ النَّوَافِلِ. And this is like this person, if he made the one tayammum, then he can pray as many nawafil as he wants with this tayammum. Even if he made one tayammum to pray the fard, then he can pray as many nawafil as he wants with it. And there's no problem with that, as long as he doesn't need to pray another fard from that. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Any questions about tayammum before we move on? Yeah.
So let's say I have a bandage on my arm, part of my arm. So I do wudu normally until I get to my arm. I wash the part of my arm that is not covered in the bandage. Then I wipe with water the bandage.
This is if it's going to cause a messed up reaction for the bandage. Some of these bandages aren't waterproof from the outside. So if you were to put water on the outside of the bandage, it would create the same harm that if you were to wipe your thing because it get waterlogged and whatnot. In this case, like you don't need to wipe over it if it's going to create harm.
Well, I leave it. I don't have to wipe.
Yeah, but you would wipe around it. You wipe everything. You make tayammum for it.
Okay. So when you say tayammum, I do tayammum by...
After you finish the wudu, you make a tayammum for it. And if you wanted to, and so the wudu is incomplete, but you did what you could. فَأْتِي بِمَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. And so, like, of course, this comes from the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says, if you were ordered to do something, then come with what you're able to. And so, and of course, this is the part that you're able to do. You do the wudu as much as you can, and you come to the edges. And if it wasn't, say you have a bandage on it, then you would come around the edges and just do a little bit. You did what you could. And of course, if it was something that was open, do you have to get all the way to it? You would get to whatever point as long as you're not actually like ruining yourself. Like you should be harming yourself. And also say you can wipe over it, but it's going to delay the process of recovery, or it's going to give you a nasty scar. In this case, you're allowed to make tayammum and not do it. You're allowed to leave it and make tayammum for that. If it's going to make a nasty scar, say someone they can do tayammum, but it's going to delay the process and make it nasty or fester it or something of that sort. And if it's going to make a nasty scar, even if it's like under your skin in some other place, that all of this is the same. If it's gonna deface you, then you can leave it off. You make tayammum. The same thing. Say if you're in ghusl and you need to make ghusl, and it's not in the places of the wudu, so you can make tayammum for that ghusl, and then you just treat as if that ghusl is covered until that time that it heals, and then you can treat it that way.
When you have, sometimes in the foot between the fingers, sometimes there is one sickness.
Yeah.
That when with the water, it becomes like a problem. Like it will be pink and it's painful.
Oh, like between the
fingers.
If you're not able to get water to a place that is open, if it's open, like the place, I'm not exactly for sure, but if it's a place that is, say there's a skin rash or something that needs to be left dry, then maybe in this case you would make tayammum for that. If it's going to hurt you, if it's going to cause some type of harm, then you leave it off and then do tayammum for that. Allah ta'ala. Yeah.
So I'm trying to find, you say we can make tayammum on dust, right? Is there any other thing we can make tayammum on besides dust?
All of it needs to have dust. Whether it's like the dirt with dust or whether it's sand with dust, but it needs to be something that in essence is from the earth.
Like wood?
That's like that you would find in the earth. So
when you say earth, right? How about rock? Rock is
if there's dust on it, if the dust, it needs to be the dust. The rock itself, no. It needs to be some type of what you would call turab. You would not call a earth. You would not call a boulder turab. Yeah.
I think last class you said that Imam Shafi'i said that the dust
needs to grow. Yeah. And this is what comes from the gubar. Like this dust is the part that can grow. And there was people, when I was like reviewing this, like the growing principle of that, like there are ways to grow in sand. Of course it's harder, but there are ways to do it. But gravel, that's something else. And also, but it needs to have some, but the dust is kind of that thing that is important for that. But yeah. Any other questions?
So the stone or something like this is not available?
And if you have enough dust on the stone to wipe yourself, great. But the stone itself, no.
if you have turab and you have stone, you have to use
Yeah, of course.
turab.
And like the Shafi'i madhab is if you don't have turab, then you pray.
How?
You without any faqad tahrain. So you don't pray with any of it. You don't have this or that. But it's sunnah for you to go hit something that you can and do it. To leave the khilaf of the people that say you can't do it. So it's sunnah to do it in that case. But they would say that you would pray without any.
And if you don't have
So no wudu, no tayammum,
Yeah, because you can't do this and you can't do that. But it's sunnah for the Shafi'i opinion is that it's sunnah to go take I think it's the Maliki madhab or some of the other madhabs, but they say anything that's on the earth, you hit it and you go do it. And that's the sunnah. And so they say it's sunnah for you to do this, leaving the khilaf. Yeah. And of course on the madhab itself, they would tell you that you need to make up these salah.
So you can't pray.
And because this is such a strange case that you would need to, no, you pray because of the time. The time has to be prayed. But you would need to make up the salah whenever you get the chance. Whenever you get the chance to either pray it with tayammum or with water, you would need to make up the salah. But of course, if you take the opinion of Imam al-Muzni, then in this case then you wouldn't have to make it up. And then of course, this is like what most of the people act upon. Yeah.
So if you're in like a desert, you just see like a bunch of sand. There's no dirt on it.
Usually, sand has dust.
Dust.
Dust. It's like if you were to smack something, you'd see poof.
But wouldn't that be like sand particles?
The sand particles, but it's kind of dust. I think it would be fine, inshallah. Okay. According to what the author here in Abu Shujaa says, no. He said if it was a raml which is sand, it wouldn't be enough. This is what he says, and this is the view. But of the other views in the Shafi'i madhab, this would be enough, as long as it had that dust in it.
And how do you know how much is enough?
It just needs to cover your hand.
Okay.
The dust needs to cover your hand that you would be covering.
So all of this sand outside on the street I can use?
Yeah. All right, any other things before we move on? All right. And so the next thing we're going to talk about najasa. And we'll talk about the different types of najasa. And this is also an important part because we talk about tahara, so we need to understand what's the opposite of it. So that we can understand what it is and how to stay to make sure that we stay away from it, or we know when we need to clean from it and how to clean it. So the author Abu Shujaa rahimahullah, he says فصل وكل ماء خرج من السبيلين نجس إلا المني. So he says this is a basic principle. Anything ma' is something that's like wet or something that's liquidy that comes out of one of the two pathways. The two pathways is a kinaya or a way of not saying, like the two places that normally number one or number two. Anything that comes out of any of these two pathways that is wet is najis. So whatever it is, it's always going to be najis. And then he said he made one exception. So we talked about before, illa al-mani, which is semen. The semen is the only exception from this rule. Everything else is najis. And the reason for the mani is, like I mentioned before, that there's a couple reasons. Of the reasons is that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to pray on his thobe, and when he would have bits of mani on his thobe, and Aisha radiallahu anha, she would scratch it off. When it was dry, she would scratch it off, and she wouldn't wash it. So the fact that she would scratch it off, and she didn't wash it with water, shows that this was something that was permissible for him to do, and it wasn't something that made it najis, because najis usually it requires water to wash it. And of the other things is that the asl of insan, like the foundation of mankind, can't be something that's najis. If like this goes against the concept of Allah saying وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam. So like that takreem for Bani Adam, it goes against the basis of us being made from najis. I'm going to say the basis of every single human is najis. Yes, of course, it's mad mahin. And so it's like something that normally it's like distasteful, but to say it's najis itself, this is of the ways that the Shafi'i madhab, they look at this.
It's the same, that the prayer najis, the prayer qabl, what comes out before.
Oh, the pre-cum. The pre-cum is najis. Pre-cum, yeah, which would be called medhi. So you have medhi, which is the pre-cum. It comes out, and maybe you feel it, maybe you don't feel it. And this is before any ejaculation. And this is something that is najis, and the proof for this being najis is that Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, Kuntu rajul madda'an, that he was a person that had lots of this. Madda, which is like a term of that he had a problem with like a lot of madi. And so he said, فَاسْتَحْيَيْتُ أَنْ أَسْأَلَ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ, and that he was shy to ask the Prophet ﷺ about this. Of course, he's married to his daughter, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he asked Miqdad ibn Aswad to ask for him. So he asked, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, فِيهِ وُضُوء, فِيهِ الْوُضُوء. And so like in this is wudu, يَغْسِلُ ذَكَرَهُ وَيَتَوَضَّأ, and that he cleans his private part and he makes wudu. And so this is, of course, like this is something we'd see that he needs to clean that part, and then he makes wudu. And also in another riwayah that he cleans whatever it fell onto, ma asaba minhu, or kama qal, that whatever came onto it and whatever it hit, whatever that thing is that the madi hit, then he also cleans that. Wandah, that وينضح عليه, or أو كما قال, that he would like, in nadah here means like washing, as they would say.
It's not to wash with water.
To wash with water, no, it means to be washed. And for the madhab, they would say that's the only thing, the reason that someone is washing after a madi, the reason that they wash is because it is najis, not because this is something ta'abbudi. They would say the reason that we wash is because this is something najis that came out, just like we have to make istinja after using the restroom. This is also like that. That we wash it because there's najis that we need to get rid of. So you only wash whatever the part that it touched or wherever it came out. You only wash this area. You don't have to wash everything. Some people say you have to wash all of it. But we look at the meaning of it is that you're cleaning what is najis. And the meaning of that necessitates that the person washes just the tip and whatever it hit, whatever the najis hit.
How about you don't know where it hit? What do you do then?
If you don't know where it hit, then there's nothing upon you. Yeah, but if you know it came out, then you just wash whatever's there. But of course, there's a general principle: is you always, if you're worried, is there najis or not, then you go with what you know, that there was a time when there was no najis, or you know that I don't see any najis. So the fact that I don't see any najis, this is enough for me. And the same thing, like if someone was doing istinja and they think maybe a drop came off afterwards, they don't see anything. This way, if someone opens up this door, they're going to open up a door to waswasa that doesn't stop. So if you don't see it and there's no clear evidence that there's something here, there's nothing upon you to do, and you act as if everything is pure. And so you don't go down this road, and that road is a very slippery road to insanity.
So the mani and the other one is the same thing.
Yeah, the mani and the medi. Mani is the semen, and medi is the pre-cum. And there's also other things that come out at the end of bawl, like after someone has used the restroom. Sometimes there's a little bit of like slimy thing that comes out, and this is called wedi. Wedi, yeah. And this is also najis. All of this is najis, except for the many. And he gives this exception here in many.
But you have to clean it.
In many?
You have to clean it.
No. You don't have to, but it's sunnah because a lot of people say that it's najis. So because there's people that say it's najis, to leave the difference of opinion, it's sunnah to clean.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is a lot of the things that we'll talk about. We'll say it's sunnah because some people said it's wajib. As long as there's nothing that's conflicting in the evidences, we'll say it's sunnah if some people said it's wajib. That's leaving the difference of opinion.
You don't have to repeat the salah if you find it before the salah.
If you found it before, if you knew that was there before the salah and then you forgot, and then you prayed your salah, you got to make up that salah because you had knowledge of it beforehand. If after your salah, you go and use the restroom sometime afterwards and you find, oh, there was something on me, you don't know when this came. Because you don't know when it came, you assume that it was the last moment that it possibly could have been. You don't assume that it was before the salah. There's nothing upon you to make before that. Unless you had known and then you forgot, that you would make up the salah for. Because you know the time that it was there. You knew it was there at that time. But if you don't know when it came out, maybe you have suppositions. We don't use suppositions here. If you know whatever time you know it was there, then this is the time that you act upon. Anything that's prayed after that time, you would make it up. Anything before, or like you're not for sure, you don't make anything up from that. Yeah. And of course, this is important with these particular chapters, because this is even like the best of people can sometimes be plagued with waswasa, where shaitan will just get them with these things. So the next thing they talked about. So we talked about these. This is one thing that is najis. Anything that is watery that comes out of the two places. And then he says here, وَغَسْلُ جَمِيعِ الْأَبْوَالِ وَالْأَوْرَوَاثِ وَالْجِبُنِ. He says, in washing all of the abwal, which is the plural of bawl, like urine, وَالْأَوْرَاث, which is the plural of rawth, which is like feces, is wajibun. And so this is something that's obligatory for someone to clean all of this. Of course, if they're wanting to pray. And that's something that is up on them or on their clothes or something of that sort. And he says, إِلَّا, he gives an exception here, إِلَّا بَوْلَ السَّبِي الَّذِي لَمْ يَأْكُلِ الطَّعَامَ. So then he says here that the exception here is except the bowl, or like the urine of a young child that hasn't eaten food yet. Then this is a boy. A sabi is a boy, not a girl. And he says, فَإِنَّهُ يَطْهُرُ بِرَشِّ الْمَاءِ عَلَيْهِ. Because this is, يَطْهُرُ, it becomes impure with rash al-ma', which is just sprinkling of water upon it. So it doesn't actually need to be washed. Where water comes on, it leaves it until the place is like, the place is like what you would say is like clean and whatnot. But this is something that water can be sprinkled onto it, on the place, and the sprinkling itself, the water hits it, and there's no water that's running on it. It just hits the place, and that's enough for it. Of course, this is as long as it doesn't have like a big stench. If it has a big stench, then you got to get rid of that. But this is a relaxation, a rukhsa, in the shariah. And this is because the Prophet ﷺ, he said this in regards to a sabi, and not in regards to the jariyah, which is the girl. And this happened with the Prophet ﷺ, where some of the people, they would bring their children to the Prophet ﷺ, and he would hold them, and also like for tabarruk, and he would pray for them and whatnot, maybe for tahniq, which is like when the baby has they get a little bit of a date and they put it in their mouth and whatnot. We'll talk about that inshallah. But the Prophet ﷺ, he was brought some of the kids and some of the young boys and there was one that peed on his coat when he was holding him, and so he just had it. He sprinkled water on it, and he didn't. وَلَمْ يَغْسِلْهُ is what is narrated, that he didn't wash it, but rather he just sprinkled water onto it and rush. And so this is something that is an exception for the boy. And this is something we don't know the reason why a boy, why not a girl. Some people, they go into different, they'll give explanations why they think it's this way. Wallahu a'lam. Like the wisdom behind it. But this is the ruling, and it's connected with the boy and not the girl. So the girl, any of the urine of a girl, it needs to be washed, actual washing. And washing, as I mentioned before, is running water onto that thing until, of course, if that thing is something that we see that there's najis on it, it needs to be washed until the najis is gone. If we don't see the najis on it, but we know that it hit it, then we need to run water over it. So that's the bare minimum of that. And that's what ghasl means, running water over that thing. And that's the running of water. As opposed to rush, which is sprinkling of water. So if I were to wash this, when I sprinkle water on, if I were to sprinkle it, there's no running water. But if I were to run it, and I'd run water where it actually like beat it up and fell down, and like little drops and whatnot, this is something I would consider ghasl. And so this when it comes to all of these things. And of course, there's no difference in the Shafi'i opinion. There's no difference between the different types of animals. All of whether it's a pig, whether it's a sheep, something you can eat, or whether it's something you can't eat. All of their excrement or urine, all of it is impure. None of it is pure.
Maybe I listened something about evil.
And this is impure as well. And yes, there was a time that the Prophet ﷺ, he's prescribed a certain drink for some people to drink the urine of a camel. The camel urine mixed with its I believe it mixed with the leaven with milk as a like this was like as a cure. And so today we be najis yajus, like to use najis, something that's najis, for the sake of a cure or something. This is permissible as long as it's not khamr. because that is not that's specific in the shariah that this is not permissible. But like for something that's najis, the Shafi'is, they say all of it is najis, and this is an exception because it's for durura, like because of the necessity. It's something that is allowed for the necessity of like for someone's health. Yeah.
You said all the animals?
And this is all animals, whether it's bird, cow, and chicken, all of this, and chicken poop, all of it is najis according to the Shafi'i madhab. They do talk about sometimes, and there's also another basic principle with najasa that I'll say, is if something is wet onto najis, it's going to take the najis from that place. So if my hand is wet and I rub against we say a dog is najis, so if I rub against the dog and my hand is wet, my hand has the ruling of najis, mutanajjis, which means that it has the ruling of najis on it. So I need to wash my hand, of course, in the way that we'll talk about for like dogs in particular. But for other things, I need to wash it. But if I pet a dog, do I need to wash my hand? My hand is dry and the dog is dry. No. If it's jaf and jaf, la yanqul bila khilaf. So like if it's something that's dry upon dry, the najis doesn't go onto it. So say you step on something that's najis but it's dry, and what you stepped on is dry, and there's nothing that's on your shoe, then there's nothing upon you. But if it's wet, that's when it would transfer. All right, and also a lot of times if you see some of these masjids, they got birds that live up top, right in the front row. And this is something that, of course, it's a problem, and it's something that the scholars, they say, as long as you're not wet on top of it, like as long as you're not making sujood while your face is wet on top of it, then this is something that's forgiven. There's no problem with that. Alhamdulillah. No, go ahead.
So even pets, like if you have a pet, because back home the family has a bunny, and he like poops everywhere sometimes. So that's najis too.
Najis. According to Shafi'i madhab, it's najis. There's the opinion of other madhabs. Anything that you eat, it's meat, it's not najis. And this is the opinion that a lot of people will take it's easier. But yeah, anything that you're allowed to eat, it's poop and pee is not najis.
That's another opinion.
That's another opinion. It's not the Shafi'i opinion. Yeah.
I've heard like camel meat breaks your wudu.
Yes, and this is an opinion that Imam al-Nawawi, he holds this opinion, but it's not a part of we never mentioned it here.
So it breaks your wudu.
This is an opinion that the Hanbalis hold, and I hold this personally, but this is not the Shafi'i opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the quantity is anyway small quantity or
of najis?
Najis.
If you can see it.
If you can see it.
If you can see it. Yeah. So if you see and they'll talk about this, if you see a fly that went in and started eating from something najis, and he was sitting on something najis, and then he comes and he jumps onto you, break your salah or no? So they say if you can't see the najis that's on his foot, then you don't worry about it. But if he's got a chunk with him, so this is, and of course if something hits you while you're in salah, you just get rid of it right away, like this, and then you're fine, as long as you did it right away. If something fell onto you while you're on your salah, if you got rid of it right away, it's okay. It's forgiven.
If it's something what?
If something najis fell from up on top that was dry, say it's got to be dry. But if it fell onto your clothes and you just do this with it really quick, not you touching it, but like just like brushing it off real quick, however you can to get that off of you. If you do it quickly, then there's no problem with that.
What if it's wet?
If it's wet, then you need to wash your clothes, so that you can't get rid of.
But you don't have to break your salah?
If it's wet, that's the thing. It would break your salah according to the Shafi'i opinion. Yeah.
What if it was wet, landed on my coat? I unzip my coat, take it off.
That's a great question. Allahu A'lam. I don't know. I don't know. Because the time is long. That's the issue. Is the time from doing this? That's a long time for it to be. But if it was right away, that's one thing. If it was if you were wearing this like something that wasn't like the sleeves, and you're just dropping it, okay. But like the actual act, that's a long time. Allahu A'lam. Moving forward here. So he says, وَلَا يُعْفَى عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنَ النَّجَاسَاتِ إِلَّا الْيَسِيرَ مِنَ الدَّمِ وَالْقَيْحِ. So he says, you're not forgiven. He's talking about what is forgiven from the najasat. When someone is forgiven in salah, of course, like for it to be there. He says, and you're not forgiven from anything from the different types of najasa, except a little bit from dam, of course, blood, or kayh, and kayh is pus. And pus is basically dead blood. pus. It's like when we have a wound, and then all of a sudden it was there, and then it turns green. You have that green goo inside the wound. This is qayh, pus, and this is actually dead blood cells, and so it's something that normally is like blood itself is najis. Whenever it comes out, this is something that's najis. But the pus itself also is najis. But he says here, you're forgiven for a small amount of it. And of course, this is out of necessity. Someone that is praying, if they have a wound and they put a bandage on the wound is going to get filled with blood. They got to pray though. So it's forgiven for them.
So blood is impure?
Oh, blood is impure. Yeah, and this is with ijma'. Imam al-Nawawi, he talks about that. There's ijma' on the fact that it's impure. Blood is impure.
But wouldn't it be from the...
This is blood from everybody.
Okay.
Blood from everybody is impure. And there's ijma'. Imam al-Nawawi, he gave that there's ijma' on this. And yes, some of the people have looked at some of the hadiths and tried to come to the view that it's not najis. But like, if there's ijma' upon it, and then there's no room for a difference of opinion. Then with any of the hadiths that come to us with that ijma' that's there, we would say, oh, this is because he has an excuse, because he can't do anything about it. Such as like the hadith that Umar radiallahu anhu, after he was stabbed, there was blood pouring out of his wound while he was in salah. And was he praying with najis? We say, yes, he's praying with najis, but he's excused because he can't do anything about it. This is looking at all of the... and so he says excused because they can't do anything about it. And this is looking at all of the adillah, like looking at all of the evidences, putting it together. And the same thing with the person who was standing in watch, and he got shot with the arrow and blood was pouring down from him while he was doing this. We would also say this was something that happened while he's in salah. There's nothing he could do about it. And so, of course, like wounds like this, we say it's forgiven for him. Of course, if he has a bandage, he can change the bandage before the salah, so that's not a lot. This is why he said al-yasir, which means a little bit. But if there's something that's a lot of it, then he needs to do something about it.
So he says excused
for a small amount.
For a small amount, blood and pus.
Blood and pus, yeah. Of course, if he can't do anything about it, like even if he changed the battery or like he changed the bandage, his like the blood would keep pouring out. And of course, he can't do anything about this. He's forgiven for that, and he prays as he is. And the same thing with qayh. In case like it's pus, which is dead blood cells in general, and this is something that is forgiven. There's something forgiven is for a small amount, and this is from the person himself. If it's from somebody else's blood, no, it's not forgiven. It's for the person himself, his own blood, and because of the necessity for him. But if it's from someone else's blood, he can wash this, and there's nothing that stops him from washing it. And this is the Shafi'i view. And he says, وَمَا لَا نَفْسَ لَهُ سَائِلَةً إِذَا وَقَعَ فِي الْإِنَاءِ وَمَاتَ فِيهِ فَإِنَّهُ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ. And he says also, whatever doesn't, he says, لَا نَفْسَ لَهُ سَائِلَةً. And this was an opinion that a lot of like the earlier people had, that the blood itself was like the nafs, or like the thing that gave that nafs, they would call that nafs lahu sa'ila, is like the blood itself that runs through the body. This is what gives that person a nafs, or something of that sort. And so this is the term he uses, ma la nafs lahu sa'ila. What he means here is, if you were to cut this thing open, does it bleed? Does it have blood or no? And so, of course, like we shouldn't be harming animals to go figure out if it does it bleed or not. But when they look at there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إذا وقع الذباب في إناء أحدكم فليغمسه كله ثم ليطرحه فإن في أحد جناحيه شفاء وفي الآخر داء. And then he says that if a dhubab, which is like something, and they would say here, this doesn't have blood in it. لا نفس له سائلة. They would say that if a dhubab fell into the ina of one of you, ina, which is like a glass or something of that container, فَلْيَغْمِسُ, and you dunk it, and then you throw it. Because in one of its جناحيه, in one of its wings, there's the shifa, and the other one is the da'. The shifa is the cure, and the other one is the disease. Da' is disease, and shifa is cure. And so this is something the Prophet ﷺ, he told us to do. And of course, he wouldn't tell us to make something najis. So of course, in general, we talked about all of the meita is najis. Anything that is meita, and then anything that's a dead animal is najis. Like dead animal. And so all of the animals, whether we consider an animal or an insect or an invertebrate or something of this sort, if it's And fish is not najis because of the fact that this is something that is made halal for us, and we can eat it. So the Prophet ﷺ said when he was asked about the water of the sea, that he said it is that it's pure, that it purifies, and also its meita is hillun, al-hillu meitatuhu, and that it's pure, it's enough for us to eat it. So of course we're not allowed to eat najis. So if it's then we'd understand that none of the dead things from the sea are actually najis, as long as it's from the sea in its essence. So that's there. But so if something is, so we see from this, what he says here, he's talking about if a fly or something of this sort falls into water, then this is something that doesn't make it najis. Because of course if it's dead, then of course it's meita. And if it's meita, then it's najis. And so it would make that thing najis by falling into it. So if you had like a bird, and you find a bird in your barrel of water, and like you got water there, and you're gonna use it to do something, and you find a dead bird in it. No, this is something. If you were to cut it, it bleeds. This is the difference that they make. But if you were to cut a fly, does it bleed? You wouldn't necessarily see like red blood. Of course, there's some kind of juice inside of it, but it's like we wouldn't see it as blood. So this is kind of the thing. Does it bleed or not? If it bleeds, then this was something that would make it najis. And if it doesn't bleed, if it fell in by itself, then it wouldn't become najis. It wouldn't make it najis. But if I were to throw it in myself, so if I killed a couple of cockroaches and I threw them into the water, it made it najis. Because the cockroaches is mutanajis, and I threw it in there, and so now it's najis. But if it fell in by itself, then I have the rukhsa that the Prophet ﷺ talked about here, like for this thing. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
So you can make wudu with this water.
Yeah, you can make wudu with the water if it fell in by itself.
Yeah.
But if someone put it in there, or if you put it in there, or someone else put it in there and purposefully, then in this case you wouldn't be able to do it. It would make it najis. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so he says, وَالْحَيَوَانُ كُلُّهُ طَاهِرٌ. And so he says all of the animals, all of them are tahir, like they're all pure. إِلَّا الْكَلْبَ وَالْخِنْزِيرَ وَمَا تَوَلَّدَ مِنْهُمَا أَوْ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا. And he says all of them are pure except for the kalb, of course the dog, or the khinzir, which is the pig, and whatever is born from them together or from one of them. So anything that comes from one of them in some type of genetic experiment or something of that sort, all of this is all going to be najis if it comes from any part of it has the kalb or khinzir. And so this is in general, of course, the khinzir, we're not allowed to eat it. And one of the reasons we're not allowed to eat it that people would understand is because it's najis. That's why would we not be able to eat something? You know, it's got to be a reason for that. And the reason that they would come up with is that it's najis. As far as the kalb, then this is also if he goes in like إذا ولغ الكلب في إناء أحدكم فليركه. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if a dog like licks or puts his tongue into the dish of one of you, then you should throw out what's in there and then wash it 7 times. One of it with and then 1 time with turab. And so this hadith shows us that, of course, the kalb is something that's najis, and because if his tongue is something that makes it najis, then like the tongue is the part that gets the most airtime when he's always panting and whatnot. It's probably going to be the cleanest part of him. This is what the the people of the madhab, they usually say his tongue gets a lot of time when he's panting and whatnot. So it'd probably be the most clean thing of him. And if the fact that is what we have to wash from, then the rest of him is from min bab al-awla. That this is something that's even more important for us to wash if anything else came from the dog. And so this is, but looking at this, and this is one of the ways to see that the kalb is something that we have to wash from it if it does this. And so this is the way normally anything that comes from a kalb is going to be najis in the Shafi'i madhab. And say a kalb, he goes into a stream, and then he sits down, he stands up and goes. You know, they twist and throw their water. All of this water is mutanajis. All of it is mutanajis. And all of that is najis, and all of that needs to be washed 7 times, one of the times with turab, according to the madhab. So this is, because all of anything that has to do with the najasat kalb, it has to be washed in this way.
Sometimes.
Allahu a'lam. And this is tabudi. This is because the Prophet ﷺ, he said 7 times. We don't understand why the 7 times, but we know that it needs to be 7 times, and one of it with turab.
So if I touch a dog with a wet hand, I have to wash that hand 7 times.
7 times, 1 time with
But not
turab.
if your hand is dry. And the
If your hand is dry and you pet the dog, okay, no problem.
But if it leaks,
If it licks you, there you go. Yeah,
Or if my hand
because
is
it's wet. Yeah, or if your hand is wet. Yeah,
Or if the dog is wet.
or if the dog is wet. If one of them's wet, then it transfers the najis.
And if I don't have dust?
A dust, and you'd have to have some type of turab. If you don't have it, then use something else, such as like if you have cleaner or any type of cleaner or something. But of course, like this is actual turab, and the madhab is that other cleaner, like or like some type of soap, doesn't do it. Doesn't take the place of that turab. The turab is something that, just like we don't understand the meaning of 7, we don't understand the meaning of the turab. And this is something the Prophet ﷺ told us, and this is wahi, so we take it and we do it. Yeah.
If the dog shakes his water and it, like let's say hits the bottom of a thobe, for example, you have to wash the whole thobe? Or
You just wash the part that it reached.
Okay.
Yep.
What about if like dogs are used for hunting, they bite on an animal and it die? Like, can you eat that?
You can eat it. Yeah, yeah. And then this is straight from the Quran, and Allah mentions us in the Quran that this is permissible for us to eat. And this is permissible from the ayat in Ma'idah, Surah Al-Ma'idah, that from Mukallibina. So like this is something that's also permissible from the dogs, and of course Allah knows best the difference between
Because
this.
they use
Yeah.
it for catch.
Yeah, to go fetch, like birding and whatnot. It's definitely very useful for that. And so the dog, I don't know about the 7 times washing. With this particular case, I don't know about the 7 times washing. But as far as like, can we eat it? Yes, without a doubt. As long as the conditions are met with that. And this comes at the end of the book. He'll talk about this, inshallah. So this is all of them are najis. All of the kalb and khinzir is najis. But all of the other animals in their lifetime, they're all pure. The basis is everything is pure in its lifetime. It's all pure. And then he says here, "Wal maytatu kulluha najisatun." And so he says here that mayta, all of it is najis. And so any type of thing that has died without an Islamic slaughter, then it's najis, all of it. And this is if we ever find like a roadkill or anything like this, all of it's najis. And also he says, وَالسَّمَكَ وَالْجَرَادَ إِلَّا السَّمَكَ وَالْجَرَادَ وَالْآدَمِيَّ. Except for, as we mentioned before, the fish and also the jarad, which is locusts, or like these types of locusts. These are also mentioned from the things that are permissible for us to eat. Meta. It's a type of big insect. Big insect that a lot of times they'll eat because there's a meaty, fleshy part in the back. The thorax has a big fleshy part that a lot of the Arabs would find very tasteful.
So only the locust, or is it things similar to the locust?
It's the locust itself. But this is you'll find this sometimes in Mecca, and there was, I think just a little while back, there was a locust infestation, and people started bagging them up and selling them to eat. Yeah. But of course, this is something that's meta, because we can't kill it. We can't kill it Islamically slaughtered. There's no Islamic slaughtering for locusts. The same thing with samak. Any fish, there's no Islamic slaughtering for fish. The fish dies when it's outside of water. There's no like slaughtering process that's for it. So of course, this is meta, but it's something that's permissible because the Prophet ﷺ said that. And also he mentions here adamiyya, which is and also any human. Like a human is also not najis in its death. So a human, that goes against that takreem that I mentioned before for like the semen itself. Like the foundation of human is not najis, as well as the end of him is not najis. And so that is mentioned here. And so just another note is anything that's cut off from something that is alive is also meta. So if you have an animal that's alive and someone cut off its ear, that ear is najis. And that takes the ruling of meta. Or if someone cut off like the arm of an animal while he's alive, this is najis as well. Yeah. And that comes from a hadith as well. The Prophet ﷺ said, whatever is cut off while he's alive is najis, or is meta.
For animals only, or?
This is for animals, yeah. And so the next thing he talks about is in regards to the kalb, in regards to the dog, he says ويغسل الإناء من ولوغ الكلب والخنزير 7 مرات إحداهن بالتراب. And so he says here that we wash the vessel that the dog licked in, or khinzir. He mentions khinzir. This was not mentioned in the hadith, but he's in a worse state. The Shafi'is, they say he's like the dog we can own sometimes, but the khinzir, there's no place for us to even own it. And the dog has certain exceptions, but the khinzir, no. And he's even worse in his state of like prohibition and najasa. So they say that he needs to also be washed 7 times. One of the times with turab. And what this usually means, like one time with turab. So you have 7 times where you're washing it, and washing is with water. One of these times you would mix turab with the water. So you'd make a little muddy paste, and you would wipe with that. All right. And it's and there's different narrations. Some of them they say ulahunna bit turab, thaminuhunna bit turab. There's different narrations, and because of the differences of the time that is in there, they all agree that all of the narrations agree upon the fact that it needs to be washed with one of the times needs to have it. And so we say the time, if it's either the beginning or it's the end, it doesn't matter. It just needs to be one of them that needs to be washed with the turab. Yeah.
The mucus of the dog it comes like
the mucus. All of it is, and this is, he says here, min wulugh al-kalb, but all of the things of the kalb, they all take the same ruling in the Shafi'i. So he mentions this, and this is like normally you would find a dog like licking something or doing something of that sort, but anything that comes from a dog that has the dog najis needs to be cleaned in this way. In the khinzir, there's no clear evidence for this, besides the fact he's worse off than the dog, but some of them would say that there's no clear evidence to say that this needs to be taken the same way. Wallahu a'lam. And he also says here, وَيُغْسَلُ مِنْ سَائِرِ النَّجَاسَاتِ مَرَّةً تَأْتِي عَلَيْهِ وَالثَّلَاثَةُ أَفْضَلُ. And so he says, and you wash all of these other types of najasat, you wash them with just one time. So of course one time that removes the najis, and one time at least you need to remove any najis that you see needs to be removed. And if you don't see it but you know that najis was there, it needs to be washed at least one time. But it's best to do 3. So like to have at least 3 times extra 2 times on top of it.
Of what?
Of water. Of water. That you would any type of najis. All of najis needs to be washed. It needs to be washed. And whether it's 1 time, but it's sunnah to do 3 times. So if you washed it and you keep washing it and you haven't got rid of it yet, you finally got rid of it, then follow it up with another 2 times. Another 2 times of running water on it, another 2 times. And that's the sunnah to do, 3 times. And so this is, in general, all of the other najasat, it needs to be washed in that way. And there's 2 types of najasat. One is that you see it, which is ayniyah, which is you can see the najis itself. And then the other type is a hukmiyah, which you know that najis hit, say I know najis hit my hand, but I don't see it anymore. You know, like it was a while back, but I know that it hit it, and say it was like urine or something that was, anything that happened. But I know where it was, and I know that it hit it, and even if I don't see it, it needs to be washed. And so I need to at least wash it with 1 time running water over it, and then an extra 2 to make it 3 times is better. Like this is the sunnah. There was one thing he didn't mention here about what is najis. Also, anything that is like muskir, that is ma'. So anything that is intoxicating, that is watery intoxication. That in its essence, it's a watery intoxication. This thing is also najis according to the madhab. And he mentions here about khamr. That he says here, وَإِذَا تَخَلَّلَتِ الْخَمْرُ خَمْرَةُ بِنَفْسِهَا طَهُرَتْ. And so what we understand is that it's not khamr, it's something that's najis. Any type of wine is najis, and also this would be beer. Any other type of thing that is that intoxicates, that is in its essence is watery or liquidy, then this is something that is najis, as opposed to like cannabis or something of this sort. In and of itself, it's not water, so it's not najis. Even if it was turned into something else, it wouldn't be najis. Of course, it's haram to use, but it's not najis. And so he says, إِذَا تَخَلَّلَتِ الْخَمْرَةُ بِنَفْسِهَا طَهُرَتْ. And of course, how do we get vinegar? Vinegar always comes through that fermentation process. And at one stage in that fermentation process, it's going to be khamr. if we were using like vinegar from grapes. At one point in time, it's going to turn into like alcohol. And then after that, when it goes through the rest of the fermentation process, then it will become like vinegar, which is the strongest part of that. And so when it goes through this, if it went through this all by itself, then in this case, when at the end result, it is pure. But if it turned into, and then he says here, وَإِنْ خُلِّلَتْ بِطَرْحِ شَيْءٍ فِيهَا لَمْ يَطْهُرْ. And if it was made into a khullilat, this comes from the word khal, which means vinegar. If it was turned into a vinegar by throwing something in it, بِطَرْحِ شَيْءٍ فِيهَا, by throwing something into you got like this, the barrel or whatever, and you got like grape juice originally, and then you let it ferment, and you want it to you want to speed up the process, so you throw something in there. Then he says lam yathur. He says then this won't become pure. And why? The reason is because if you threw something into something that is najis, this thing that you threw into the thing that's najis, to speed up that process, it became najis. Then when the rest of it turns by itself, when it would turn to purity, you got something najis sitting in it. So that thing turns it back into najis. Make sense? And like the sides of it don't play a role in this. The sides of it, right? And that's a great question. But in general, they would say no. Wallahu a'lam. That's a good question.
What if it changes the form?
Even if it changes the form, we know that we added something to this, and this thing that we added, we know that it's not a part of the original thing. And so when the original thing turned, even if we don't see that thing, we know that there's something in it that's added that's turning it back into najis.
So vinegar?
Vinegar in general, we assume that people did it the right way. Yeah, we need to have some evidence to prove that they didn't do it the right way. Yeah, but of course, this is something that, of course, vinegar is something that's okay to use. But vinegar always, like for the most part, there's a reverse way to do it, but for the most part, the way is always going through the fermentation process, which turns it into the wine or something that's fermented, and that's muskir, and then it comes into the state of vinegar afterwards. So as long as nothing came in and was added to it, then it won't be. Then it becomes pure afterwards. So it becomes najis, of course, when it's in the middle of that phase, and then it would turn back into something that's pure at the end of it. As long as nothing was added. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Any questions about what we went over here? All right, and so we have just a little bit left for us to finish Kitab al-Tahara. It's just we're going to talk about, if you guys are down, we'll talk about haid, menstruation, nifas, which is a little bit about that, and then also we'll talk about some of the rulings of someone who doesn't have wudu, or they don't have the tahara. If you guys are down, we can continue if you want. Right. And so he says, faslun وَيَخْرُجُ مِنَ الْفَرْجِ ثَلَاثَةُ دِمَاءٍ. And this is something that in general, in this chapter, a lot of times people they'll take the page and they'll just glue it shut, and they don't want to see it. And it's, of course, as men, this is not necessarily the thing we always want to talk about, but all of us were hoping to get married one day, and someone needs to teach the women, and the women are too shy to ask.
Sister.
Yeah, and this is, of course, a good woman, she's going to be shy, but of course, if she doesn't know, she has to go out there and seek the knowledge for her to know these things. There's no way around it. She needs to learn these things. And so the best, of course, is having someone in her family that is knowledgeable and that can tell her the basic ways of how to deal with these things. So that's the reason why we must know about it, because the men they don't want to learn it, and the women, they're too shy to ask. So someone needs to step up. Yeah. So he says here there's 3 types of dimat, or like blood that exit from her private part, and he says damul hayd wal nifas wal istihada. And so all of the different types of blood, they separate into these three categories. Either it's something that's from menstruation, or it's from something that is from postpartum bleeding. Nifas is postpartum bleeding, and it comes from the word like nafs, like nafs or nefas. So nafs is like a soul, and when a soul is born, you would call this nifas. Like because the soul, like the nafs, came into existence, or like came out, and so this is what they call it nifas. Or because during this time, this postpartum bleeding, the rahim, or like the womb, gets a time to breathe and a time to get rid of these things. So it's like it gets a breath, So that's why it's called nifas. And then also, so it's either there's the type that is menstruation, or it's nifas, which is postpartum bleeding, or it's istihada. And this is just other types of, this is all the miscellaneous other things that don't fall into these two categories. It's all going to be istihada.
What is
Istihada is a type of like bleeding. It comes from the same word haid, but this is any type of other bleeding that would happen outside of menstruation. And so he'll give a definition here. And he says, فَالْحَيْدُ هُوَ الدَّمُ الْخَارِجُ مِنْ فَرْجِ الْمَرْأَةِ على سبيل الصحة من غير سبب الولادة. And so he says here that this is dam al-khariju, that comes out. Dam is blood.
No, istinada you want to speak
The istihada, he'll give a definition here. We'll give it's the other types of blood.
Now is
We're talking about menstruation. Okay. So he gave the three different types, and then he's going to talk about each one of these three. So he says, فَالْحَيْدُ هُوَ الدَّمُ الْخَارِجُ. So it's dam, it's blood. Al-kharij, the one that comes out, min farj al-mar'ati, from her private part, ala sabil al-sihha, when she's in a state of, like, she's in a healthy state. This is something that comes out from a state of health. Min ghayri sabab al-wilada. And then he says, from a reason other than childbirth.
While she's healthy?
While she's healthy. Yeah, a healthy woman. And of course, normally a healthy woman, she has menstruation cycles. And so this is normal for her. And it's actually unhealthy for a woman not to have these, or to have them very rarely. And so this is and he also said min ghayri sabab al-wilada, because of course all of this would be the wilada is the childbirth. So this is from some other reason other than childbirth. And if it's from childbirth, then this would be a nifas. Of course, then that comes out when she's healthy as well. But he says here, وَلَوْنُهُ, we're talking about hayd again. He says, in its color, أَسْوَدُ مُحْتَدِمٌ لَذَّاعٌ. And so this is usually like a dark aswad, which is like blackish, muhtadim, which is like a hard, kind of has a bad smell, ladha, which is something that hurts, it's painful. And so this is kind of like the telltale signs of it. And of course, the woman that goes through it, she'll understand the different variations of this, and she should be aware of the difference between this and something else. So she should understand what is menstruation, what is not. And usually she can tell the difference between these things. And also she should also keep in mind the time of the month that she has their period normally. This is something she should be mindful of. When is her period? Usually it's always like the 28 days, the cycle, the lunar cycle. And she should have an idea of the time that it comes every month, as well as she should have the idea of how many days she normally has it. This is something she should always keep track of. Because if something ever happened where something, like say there was something that we didn't know, like she started having bleeding problems, then in this case we would go back to what was the normal thing, and any of the bleeding problems we would say is outside of that time. So she memorized her time, then we would put her in that time, and then we would say anything that came out outside of that time is her other bleeding problems. And we'll talk about that. That's the istihada. This is the dam that comes out at a time other than hayd or nifas.
But women have sometimes his period very regular. So
Irregular periods, yeah. And if there's nothing there, then there's no problem. But if there's bleeding, this is the problem. If there's bleeding at a time other than the time that is her period, that's when the problem comes. If she doesn't have a period, if she skips periods, then she's pure the whole time. There's no problem with that. There's no issue. The issue is if blood starts coming at a time other than normal. That's when we have to look at the time. When did she have it? How many days does she normally have her period? And what are the days that she has her period? All right. And so he talks about, and also she should know the difference between the colors as well. And so he says here, وَالنِّفَاسُ هُوَ الدَّمُ الْخَارِجُ عَقِبَ الْوِلَادَةِ. And nifas is the dam, the blood that comes out after wilada. And this, he'll talk about the times of these as well. And then the definition he gives for istihada is هُوَ الدَّمُ الْخَارِجُ, the dam that comes out, فِي غَيْرِ أَيَّامِ الْحَيْضِ وَالنِّفَاسِ, that comes out in days other than menstruation or nifas.
What was the definition for nifas?
Nifas is the dam that comes out, the blood that comes out after childbirth. Wilada is childbirth. And aqiba means after.
Aqiba?
Aqiba, yeah. And so here he says, well, istihada. And so this is the definition of istihada is something that comes out after, and another time other than the menstruation. And usually this has something to do with she's not healthy. Like usually istihada is something that happened where there's a problem. And so she would need to be aware of if something came out at other than her normal time. Then that would be called istihada.
Would a miscarriage count as istihada or?
No, that would be a miscarriage. No, that would be like nifas. And if there is any bleeding that comes out after that, then that would be nifas until it ends. Wallahu a'lam. So then he says here, he wants to talk a little bit about haid in some of the time period of it. So he's going to talk about haid, which is menstruation. He says, وَأَقَلُّ الْحَيْدِ يَوْمٌ وَلَيْلَةٌ. And so he says the smallest amount of like the menstruation period is going to be a day and night, 24 hours. This is the smallest amount of menstruation. It will be a day and night. And where does he get this from? Like the Imam Shafi'i, he got this just from looking at the reality of the situation with all the women. If he went around all of the women that he would ask about how long was it was never under a day. So all of it's going to be in a day. And so anything that, if it's broken up, we'd say, we put all this together, does it make up a day? You know. And also another, and he says here, وَأَكْثَرُهُ, so the smallest amount is 1 day, 1 night, with 24 hours. And the most of it, وَأَكْثَرُهُ خَمْسَةَ عَشْرَ يَوْمًا. And the most of it is going to be 15 days.
Sometimes 1 day and sometimes...
And the most that it will be, the most that it possibly can be is 15 days. It will never be more than 50 days. And the normal, he says, وَغَالِبُهُ سِتٌّ أَوْ سَبْعٌ. And the normal is 6 or 7. Okay. Yep. So he gives you the biggest and he gives you the smallest. These, of course, are abnormal. Then he says the normal is 6 or 7. Of course, this is known. But the reason he gives this, in general, there's a principle when it comes to hayd. Well, the beginning of it, when it comes, we take from the beginning of it, and whatever it ends, this is the end. Say it ended at day 3. Nothing came out. Day 5, it comes. All of this time, it was there. We say all of this happened within 15-day window. All of this that happened within that 15-day window is going to be hayd. So even if it breaks 1 day and then it comes back the next day, all of this is still hayd. And if she knows that her days usually break up that way, then she doesn't need to like go and make a shower and whatnot and go pray. No, if she knows this is normally that there's a break on like day 4 and then it comes back day 5 and then 6, it finishes off, then she knows herself and she doesn't need to like pray at this time. And if she were to fast in the time when there was a break, then that fast needs to be broken. It needs to be made up because it was at a time when she was in hayd. And this is in general, this is how it'll always be brought into one thing. So you can't have a woman that has say day 1, she has her period. She has day 1 and she has a night and then it stops. And then after the 3rd day, it starts back up. This is not a new period. This is the same one. And then if it was like if it stopped, we wouldn't say this is another period. We say all of this is one period. And so we take all of it and put it, if it's in a 15-day window, all of it is one period from the beginning to the end of it. And then if it doesn't fit into the 15 window period, we'll talk about this in bigger books.
Even if it goes against her regular...
The regular time?
Yeah.
And he also says, so here it's 15 days. Also, he'll talk about أقل الطهر بين الحيضتين 15 يوما. And so the smallest amount of purity between two is 15 days as well. So if there's anything between after, like there's 15-day period, after she had that 15-day period, then she has something that comes outside of that 15-day period, this is something else. It's not hayd.
What if it's within the 15-day period?
If it's within the first one, from the beginning to the end is all hayd.
Even if like the past years it's been like
in like 6 days and whatnot.
Yeah.
In the Shafi'i madhab, it would all be hayd. Yeah. So there's other people that would say, no, she goes off of what she knows, and if she knows that there's a difference because she can tell, then she would know that this is something different. and she would hold on to what she knows, like from her normal things. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. But in general, sometimes the woman, she will have a normal period of like maybe it's like 6 days, and one day she has one period she has like 7 or 8 days. Strange for her.
So that says 15 days as continuous.
Mm.
Then
If it went over 15 days, we know that this was
16.
istihada. As soon as it would say, okay, this can't be period, because if it was a period, it'd have to be in 15 days. So this that went over it, we'd say it's istihada. And this is anything that doesn't fit into these 15-day periods. We have 15 day of at the most, we won't have anything more than 15 days of bleeding, and at the most, we won't have anything less than 15 days of purity. So this is how we work between these two. And then we kind of put them in the brackets here. Of course, in bigger books, we'll go into more details of the what ifs. And of course, if you ever do have questions or you need fatwa, then you ask because that's important for the individuals if they have a question about that. And so this is where he talks about, and the most of it is 6 or 7 days. This is the normal. And he says, "Well, qal al-nifas lahda." And he says the smallest amount of nifas is just a second, second, then it ends. Assuming that a woman would have this, and this is something that we can imagine, but it doesn't happen. Like to assume that a woman after she had childbirth, there was a little bit of blood that happened afterwards, and then there was no more. He would say, okay, and then she was done. This normally doesn't happen. And then he says, وَأَكْثَرُهُ سِتُّونَ يَوْمًا. And so we have the smallest amount, which is just a lahda, or like a second. And then we have the most of it, which is 16 days. Or 60 days. 60 days is the most of it. So nifas. Yeah. And so nifas is going to, at the most, it will be 16 days. After 16 days, if she's still bleeding, then we say this is istihada. All right.
smallest amount of time is a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, it's kind of imaginary scenario, but yeah. And then the most of it is 60, not 60, 60. Afwan. I said 16 at that first time. Yeah. 60, as we say in America. And then, so this is the most. If it comes over that, then it's istihada. And then he says, وَلَا حَدَّ. And then he says, وَغَالِبُهُ أَرْبَعُونَ يَوْمًا. And the normal is like 40 days. It's normal. So if a woman after 40 days, she's still going, there's still some things that are coming out here and there, then she waits until it stops. And if she goes over 60 days, okay, and we say 60 days, khalas, go back to doing all of your acts of worship.
So you
And the rest is istihada.
You can't have relationships with your own.
We'll talk about this. This is the next thing. But in general, haid, no. And also, nifas is the same as haid, no.
Oh.
But after 60 days, yes. Because then it's one over 60 days, khalas.
Like it so.
Yeah, and so it's normal. It's like 40 days is what's narrated in the time of the Sahaba. They narrated that normally they would sit for 40 days. But in general, like looking at the people in normal, 60 days is what Imam Shafi'i came up with as the most amount. Anything over that, it goes into, that's the other problems. That's other issues that doesn't have to do with childbirth. Yeah, it's not nifas at that point. It's istihada. And then he says here, going back to tuhr. Now he's talking about tuhr, and he says, أقل الطهر بين الحيضتين 15 يوما. And so he says that the least amount of that purity between two times periods is 15 days. So you'll never have something that's less than that between two periods.
I don't understand.
So you have a time where she's menstruating, and then say she stopped her menstruation, and then she had a week, and then she started bleeding again. This is actually, she's still in her purity. Yeah, it can't be a period because 15 days haven't gone by yet. 15 days need to go by before her next period can come. So we know that something is wrong at this point. And of course, the person...
Before these 15 days?
Yeah, this is, before the end of the 15 days of purity, if she starts bleeding before those 15 days, we know something else is wrong. This is not a period.
So between two cycles is 15 days.
Yeah, the longest a period will ever be is 15 days, and the shortest a purity will ever be is 15 days.
that's for that specific person that had that 15 days.
All of the people with 15 days of the purity, the smallest purity there will ever be is 15 days. That's of course, this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab. But the shortest period will be 15, or the shortest purity will be 15 days. There's no period that comes, it goes, and then comes back before these 15 days have ended. Or like before 15 days of purity have come. So we know something happened here. And so we'd have to look back at that. Yeah.
So basically, but for, you say the normal person is 6 days or 7 days, huh?
Yeah.
So, but for
That's for menstruation.
Oh, this is different.
6 or 7 days is menstruating. That's normal. And for purity, usually it's the rest of the month, of course. So like the normal would be the rest of the month, which is, how much is that? That's like 21 days. Yeah. And normally it'd be 21 days. But if it ever got short, and it was shorter than 15 days, we'd have to look and say something is istihada here. Yeah. And he says, وَلَا حَدَّ لِأَكْثَرِهِ. And there's no longest amount of purity. The purity could be the rest. Some women don't have periods. Period. Like they're like, maybe they'll go 3 years and they never have a period. And so if she's of this sort of person, then we don't say that she has any type of period at this time. We say she doesn't have a period. All right. We only talk about it if it's there. Like the normal thing for a woman is that she's pure until proven impure. So. And so there's no had for the longest period of purity. The purity goes until some type of menstruation comes or nifas. And he says, وَأَقَلُّ زَمَنِ تَحِيدُ فِيهِ الْمَرْأَةُ تِسْعُ سِنِينَ. And so he's saying the youngest a woman can have her period in is 9 years, and this is lunar years, not solar years. 9 years, and this is give or take a month if the month maybe can get in there, but 9 years. And this is of course the woman who grows up in a hotter climate normally will have that grows up in a hotter climate such as Saudi Arabia or somewhere that's very hot. They will usually have their periods earlier than someone who grows up in like a colder climate such as like Europe and whatnot. Usually it's later. But of course, like if you look up online and whatnot, see what's the youngest a girl can have her period, they'll say about 9 years old or something, and they say it does come early. And so this is a possibility. But anything before 9 years old, if there's any bleeding before that, we say no. If it's not, give or take that month, that could be a grace period. Maybe it is, but if it's not at that month, give or take that month, and this is lunar years. If it's not there, and so like this would be like 8 years something, 8 and change. But this is in general. We would look, if anything that comes before that, we won't say that she has a period until she's come to 9 lunar years. And then the next thing that he says here, وَأَقَلُّ الْحَمْلِ سِتَّةُ أَشْهُرٍ وَأَكْثَرُهُ أَرْبَعُ سِنِينَ وَغَالِبُهُ تِسْعَةُ أَشْهُرٍ. So he says here that the smallest amount of child pregnancy, and haml is pregnancy, like carrying, because she's carrying the baby. Haml. The smallest amount is 6 months, and like scientifically now we can see that it's the apparatus in a child for breathing doesn't develop until this time.
So this is for nifas.
We're talking about just the time for this. We're talking about the time because it has to do with nifas. It's the time of pregnancy. And this also has other. This is a good place to mention it because it has other rulings later on down the line, when it comes to seeing whose child is who. And so the smallest amount of the haml is 6 months, and the most amount is 4 years. Allahu a'lam. The reason he says 4 years is because it was narrated that there was a very large lady, I think it was around the time of the Tabi'in. There was a very large lady and she said she was pregnant. And she said she was pregnant, and then she said she was still pregnant, and they're still waiting for her to have her baby. She's still pregnant. And it's narrated she had the baby and it had teeth and hair and everything. So
When she gave birth?
Allahu a'lam bi sihhati. So it was 4 years. So they said it happened. Although I think I looked this up before, and I think it was like there was someone that was like 17 months. I think it was what I saw something about 17 months that they recorded like the world's longest pregnancy. I think they said like 17 months. But of course, at this point, there's serious issues that can happen. There's serious issues. After 10 months, like things start going wrong in the body, like unless they have the baby. But here he says 4 years, and this is Allahu Adam bisawab. So there are some things that are based on things. It's not necessarily Quran and Sunnah. Like most of this chapter is not based on Quran and Sunnah. There's some things that are like such as like the 6 months. There's evidence from the Quran because وَحَمْلُهُ وَفِصَالُهُ 30 شهرا. That Allah says that like the haml, the carrying, and fisal, which is like the weaning, is 30 months. And we also have in another the other one وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ. And that's 2 years. And so if we take the fisal, we take this to the side and we say the haml, what's left? 6 months. And like this happens. Like preemies happen at 6 months, and it happens. There can be problems, but like it happens. And I like one of my sheikhs, he said that there have been people around like 5 months. Usually they have serious problems, but it's possible. Wallahu a'lam. But normally they take that 6 months is the smallest amount. So if you got married to a woman and she had a baby at 6 months after you got married, this is your baby. There's no saying that this is not your baby. Yeah, right? And so this is normally, unless it's like serious other evidences, but this is like the benefit of us learning this now is like to know that this person is that baby, or like the 4 years. A benefit of like knowing this is if you went on a journey after and being with your wife, and 3 years later she gives birth and you haven't come back yet.
She's gonna bring the evidence that
yeah. والله المستعان. نعم ويحفظنا. So and also وغالبه 9 أشهر. Of course we know that 9 months is the normal. It's the normal thing for the childbirth. So here's going to go into the benefit of knowing what are the rulings related to haid and nifas, and basically it's the same. Haid, nifas, they both get the same prohibitions. The prohibitions are the same across the board. One, which is no praying, as-salah. He says, وَيَحْرُمُ بِالْحَيْدِ وَالنِّفَاسِ ثَمَانِيَةُ أَشْيَاء. As-salah, so first is salah, that's yahrum, it becomes haram. And was-sawmu, which is fasting, and of course these are both with ijma'. وَقِرَاءَةُ الْقُرْآنِ, and also reading the Qur'an. This is outlined, moving your tongue with the Quran. This is also haram, and the reason for this is a hadith from Ibn Umar that the Prophet ﷺ says لا يقرأ الجنوب ولا حائد شيئا من القرآن.
So the recitation is not allowed?
This is hadith that's narrated that there is weakness in some of the chains of it, but because of all the different riwayat of like bringing together all the different chains, then a lot of like the Shafi'i opinion is that this hadith is sahih, and that this is something that's prohibited for her to recite.
So not touching
the recitation. Then the next thing he says, وَمَسْحُ الْمُصْحَفِ وَحَمْلُهُ. This is another issue, and touching the mushaf and carrying it.
Depends on dua.
What's that? Dua without the intention of reciting Quran is no problem with.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and this is the area of debate. And like if you find someone that gives you a fatwa of something, go with the fatwa if you need to. But this is the area. This hadith is subject to discussion. Like this hadith, if the hadith is sahih, then okay, so this is clear. But if the hadith is weak, then this is the issue where you have to look for some of the other evidences. Wallahu a'lam. And also the nifas in this case is like he said in the hadith it's haid, and so nifas is like the haid in general. But Allahu a'lam fi hada. So وَمَسْخُ الْمُصْحَفِ وَحَمْلُهُ. And this is pretty much the madhab of the Salaf in general. Like most of the Salaf, all of them pretty much agreed that the Mas'h al-Mushaf is not permissible for someone who is not in a state of purity. And also this comes from a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he wrote in a letter to two people when he was writing, in the letter, in that he said, لا يمس القرآن إلا طاهر. ألا يمس القرآن إلا طاهر. And so this is the hadith that is narrated. And Ibn Abdul Bar, he says in At-Tamheed that this hadith is mutawatir. ولا يحتاج إلى تصحيح. Like this is a hadith that it's there's so much of it that we don't even need to look at the ruwat. Yeah, they say it's mursal, which is like it's separated. There's not the sahabi that's narrating it. But he said this hadith is so well known, we don't even need to look into it. What's that? There's so many people that have narrated this hadith, in particular this book that the Prophet ﷺ had sent and like narrated from it. There's so many people that did this, and we don't even need to look at who narrated what. At this point, there's so many different versions of this. It comes mutawatir, and it's an evidence. So of course, like knowing that is like holding the mushaf and also carrying it. Hamluhu is like more than holding it. Like if I were to touch it, a mess. This is mess. And haml, this is haml, like this is holding it or like carrying it, and whatnot. So these two things are impermissible for the woman while she's either on her period or in postpartum bleeding. Also, the next one of these 8 things. So we said the first one, salah, som, fasting, qira'atul Quran, which is the third one. Mas al-mushaf wa hamluhu, maybe we say that's 5 and 6. Dukhul masjid, entering a masjid. And this is if she fears that she's going to drop najis into the masjid. Like if she fears for herself, like maybe she's not, maybe like not everybody has like the best apparel and whatnot. Maybe they were going to drop like something that's najis into the masjid. In this case, if she fears that, then it's haram. If she doesn't fear it, then it's a makruh. Then it's makruh for her to go in. If she doesn't fear that. And this is, there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said that he doesn't make the masjid halal for someone that is liha'id. لا أحل المسجد لحائد ولا جنوب. And so this is for the person that is going to sit in the masjid for a long period of time. If she's just walking through, okay, this is one thing. And if that's of course that she's not going to make any mess, or she's not going to drop any najis. But in general, there's other hadith that come along this similar meaning. Of course, this is an area of debate, but this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab. And also what tawaf and going around the bayt. So going around the Kaaba in tawaf, this is also haram, and this is because the Prophet ﷺ, when he was talking to Aisha, he said, do everything that the Hajj does, because she became ha'id while she was in the Hajj, and so he said, do everything that a person that's making Hajj does except tawaf. And so she had to wait until she was pure, and then she could do the tawaf. For that. And so of course and we understand that this is something that needs to be done for tawaf. They need to be in a state of purity. And also wat, and this is which is intercourse. What is intercourse? And والاستمتاع بما بين السرة والركبة.
What means intercourse?
الوط. وط. Wow and ta. Yeah. And so, wata. Yeah, wata'a, yata'u. And so this is, and like normally it means like pressing. Like if someone was wata al-ard, al-ard, this is like he stepped on the earth. Waw ta hamza. Yep. And so this is intercourse, and this is something that is, of course, with ijma' that that's not permissible, and it's not permissible to come to her until she's taken the shower to come back after that. So when she has taken her ghusl after the end of her haid or nifas, this is when it's permissible to go back to her in intercourse. And he also adds one other thing: وَالِاسْتِمْتَاعُ بِمَا بَيْنَ السُّرَّةِ وَالرُّكْبَةِ. And he says also like pleasuring oneself with what's between the belly button and the knees. So one is not allowed to pleasure himself with what's between this and that. This is what he mentions here, and this is one of the views in the Shafi'i madhab. And Imam Nawawi, he talks about this, that he actually, there's another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ was asked about someone with his wife when she's on her period, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "Isna' kulla shay'in illa nikah." He said, isna, like do whatever you want. Do kulla shay'in. Like this is a very, very like uloom. This type of kulla shay'in, this is a uloom. Like one of the strongest types of uloom that we talked about in the last class. Isna kulla shay'in. Kulla shay'in illa nikah. And then with the exception, and we have the istithna, and the muttasil here, except nikah. And nikah here means what? It means intercourse. Of course, nikah, it means intercourse, or it means the actual, like the act, like the contract, or it means intercourse. It means both of them. But here it means intercourse. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, do everything except for the intercourse. And of course, the actions of the Prophet ﷺ was that he would have his wives wear something. Yeah, Tazir, that they would wear like something that's between their belly button and their knees. And this is the action that he would have. And then he would pleasure himself with what is other than that. And wallahu ta'ala alam. But Imam An-Nawawi says this hadith is general, and it's best to take with the generality of this hadith, and there's nothing that's clear to say that everything between that is haram. Just because the Prophet ﷺ did it isn't proof that this is haram for someone to do other than that. And this is where Imam Nawawi he says that this is the stronger opinion. Yeah, and also Ibn Daqiq he says that the fi'l, the action itself, and doesn't necessitate hurma. And we'll talk about this in the next couple classes in al-Warqat, that the actions, if the Prophet ﷺ did something, this doesn't prove that us not doing it is haram. And so like the fact that the Prophet ﷺ used to do this doesn't prove that if we didn't do it that we're doing something haram. And this is a principle in usul that we'll look into. And so Allahu a'lam bisawab, walakin this is very like that hadith, it's not kulla shay'in illa nikah. This is the stronger opinion, wallahu ta'ala a'lam, that the person should be able to do whatever they want with her as long as they don't do intercourse. But of course we know that Shafi'i opinion, and like the majority of the Shafi'i opinion, they hold that this is something that's not permissible to do. And of course if someone is going to fall into haram, if they don't make certain precautions for them, they need to make those precautions. Like if somebody can't hold themselves back from falling into haram, they need to make sure that they take whatever precautions they need to. Also, and we're almost done here, and I know we've gone a little long. He says, وَيَحْرُمْ عَلَى الْجُنُبِ خَمْسَةُ أَشْيَاء. And so he says that for a person who's junub, there's 5 things, a little less than the person who's haid. And there's 5 things that become haram for him, يَحْرُمْ. And so this is the person who's junub. The first one is salah. This is with ijma'. And the second one, qira'atul Qur'an. And as I mentioned that hadith previously, that the first one is salah. Of course, we can't pray when we're junub. Illa abiri sabil, like wala junuban. So Allah says, la taqrabu salat wa antum sukara hatta ta'lamu ma taqulun wala junuban. So not when you're in a state of janaba. Illa abiri sabil. إلى عابري السبيل حتى تغتسلوا, except for the people, like إلا عابري السبيل. This is on the tafsir, like if we look at the explanation, that coming to the salah here is coming to the places of salah, such as the masjid. So the person who we'll talk about here, but this is, so salah we can't do if we're junub, of course. Also another one is qira'atul Quran. This is the second one that he gives. And going back to the text here, so reciting the Quran is something that we can't do if we're in a state of janaba, because of the other hadith I mentioned before, and that the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يقرأ الجنوب ولا حائض شيئا من القرآن. Of course, we mentioned that there's a little bit of kalam when it comes to that particular hadith, but this is the madhab, is that this is something that's haram for someone to do. And also there's other things that other evidences, such as the Prophet ﷺ, nothing would stop him from that except for and like nothing would stop him from reciting the Quran except for junub, being in a state of janaba. Wallahu ta'ala alam. So, and also mash al-mushaf wa hamluhu, so carrying and touching the mushaf, and hamluhu, and carrying it, and also with tawaf, and going making tawaf. And this is because tawaf is like salah, and that we need to have all the shurut for salah. We need to also have this for tawaf, like the body being pure, in a state of purity. As the Prophet ﷺ said, the tawaf is like salah, except that you're allowed to speak while you're in it. So
Quran is no problem.
The Quran shouldn't be recited. It shouldn't be recited while someone is in a state of junub. Yeah, the Quran. If someone is junub, they shouldn't recite the Quran. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, and this is going off of the other hadith. The other hadith, there's issues in some of it, but also when it comes to when it comes to junub, there's no, like, this is the part where there's no issues in the part when it comes to junub. In that hadith, لا يقرأ الجنوب شيئا من القرآن. There's many hadith that come with this meaning, and some of them came with wal ha'id, adding the person who is menstruating. But the one that comes with junub, there's a lot more of these, and this is a lot stronger. And this is a hadith that would be hasan. And that's what a lot of the scholars, they said that this hadith is hasan when it comes to the junub, and the ha'id is where there's more differences of opinion. Yeah.
The Prophet Muhammad sent the companions on the expedition one time, and one of the leading companion prayed in junub. So
yeah, he made tayammum though. He made tayammum. Yeah, but he was junub though. Yeah, but he made tayammum.
So these are the things that are common between ha'id and
there's 5 of them. They're all common. The ha'id is more severe. She's got a couple things added here. As we mentioned here, Sawm.
With this,
We didn't mention Sawm for the junub. The junub is allowed to fast. That doesn't affect him. Like if he woke up and he's junub in the days of fasting, there's no problem with that. Prophet ﷺ used to wake up when he was junub, and he would yusbih. Yeah. And he would continue with Sawm. That doesn't affect it. And also he says Mashu mushaf wa hamluhu. This is for junub. And he says tawaf. Also this is for tawaf. Also lubth fil masjid. There's one thing that's shared between the ha'id and them is staying for a long time in the masjid. So the person who is wanting to do i'tikaf, if he becomes junub, he needs to go make ghusl and then come back. And so this is when it comes to the junub. And for the person who's muhtith, which is the last part here, he says وَيَحْرُمَ عَلَى الْمُحْتِثِ ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْيَاء. So there's 3 things for the person who is in a state of the lesser impurity. And muhtith means someone who doesn't have wudu. Someone who lost wudu.
The prohibition
for the person who doesn't have wudu, of course he can't pray. That's one. As-salah is the first one. And the second one is at-tawaf. Of course he can't make tawaf. He needs to make sure he's in a state of tahara for that. And also mashu al-mushaf wa hamluhu. And touching the mushaf when he's in a state of when he's not in a state of tahara, or carrying it like this. If he has it in his bag and he's carrying other things, or his bag is not a bag that's specific for the mushaf, he can carry that while it's in his bag. Of course he can't like touch it by himself, but he can carry it while it's in his bag, and there's no problem with that.
It's like in a cover.
It's in a cover. The cover takes the ruling of it.
What if you like have gloves, you put it on?
The gloves okay.
Gloves okay.
Yeah, and the same thing if you have let me see here. I think this just stopped. And also if you have like a pen or a pencil, like this has a eraser, if you were to move the pages like this is okay.
So the pen doesn't take your ruling?
No, this is separate from me.
Okay.
So reading it like this is something, Imam Nawawi, he basically is very, very strong about the fact that this is okay for someone to do. And then this is for salah and mash al-mushaf. So this is not mash. And hamluhu, which is like carrying it. And no, there's no problem with that. No problem with that.
So you can carry it with gloves or a piece of cloth.
Yeah, wallahu a'lam. There's a little bit of difference of opinion about actually carrying it with, because you'd still be, even if I was to take this and I were to do this, okay, that's no problem. But if I'm carrying it, I would still be called carrying. Regardless of whether I call it mess, I'd still be called carrying. So in that case, it would be, that's something to avoid.
So if I put it in a bag?
Yeah, and also if you're scared that some type of harm is going to come to the mushaf, say you're scared because there's a kid that's about to grab the mushaf and do something with it. So you got a toddler or something that grabs mushafs and throws them. So you are in a state of purity. You can grab the mushaf, put it in a place of purity to save it from that toddler. And if there's a case of this, there's a little bit of leniency here when it comes to this. Or if you're able to make tayammum real quick just to get it and put it to a place, you can do that real quick. If you're not able to do that for some type of necessity.
How about if I have the mushaf and it's in my bag and I have to go use the restroom?
Yeah, okay, so in this case, you can take, if you're scared of your belongings, you can take the mushaf while it's still inside your bag. Your bag is closed. You put it and you can take it into the stall with you if you're scared that your bag outside the stall might get stolen.
Okay.
Of
So
course,
I
like
can
hang it up along the farthest part of it, and don't like open it up or do anything with it. But yeah, it's fine. And inshallah, as long as because you're scared that someone's going to steal, and this is, of course, this is more important than that. Yeah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير